Patzer's Playground, Season 1 finale, Episode 10. What's gonna happen? Alright, here we go. So we're actually gonna get a pretty good opening from this one, so I can't really comment much on it, but we're gonna skip to later in the game, because this opening is pretty standard. Can't really comment much on it. Okay. So, castle, g4, good move. f4, chasing the knight away, so knight goes to c4. Queen e2, attacking the knight, so far so good. Rook c8, so kind of developing with a tempo by defending the knight. b3, trying to chase the knight away. Knight to a3. So the knight is now potentially attacking c2, and also this rook is kind of x-raying this knight down to the pawn. Okay, so knight d5, e6 to chase the knight away, and now knight b4. So now the knights are kind of awkwardly placed. This knight's defending c2, this knight's defending c2, but black has a lot of pressure here. So now black develops his queen with the gain of time. So queen a5. This is two Patzers. They just knew it, and they just knew the opening pretty well. So queen a5 now attacks the knight. Good move, because it also gains time. So now black has to play this move queen e1. Or sorry, white has to play this move queen e1. So now notice all of white's pieces are kind of huddled on the back two rows. These knights are precarious. They're both being attacked. This knight on a3 is doing damage on c2. So now black plays this move h4. So notice that all of white's pieces are kind of tied down. So obviously bishop takes h4, it just loses a piece because d4 is hanging. And now g3 is threatened. So this is getting very interesting. Okay, so bishop e3. White tries to save his piece. h3, trying to create weaknesses on the light squares. g3. Okay, so now knight b5, attacking this knight twice. So white has to move it or defend it. So white decides to defend it with rook d1. But now knight c3, and now this knight is hitting e4, and suddenly white's position is collapsing because the king side is locked up, but now the center is going to get taken over by black's pieces. Notice that black's king is still in the center, but it's fine because black's pieces are just so much more active than white's. So knight d3, trying to pin this knight to the queen. So the queen simply drops back. And then after moving the rook, knight takes pawn. Black has won a pawn. This knight is a monster on e4. Can never really evict it. And white's kind of moving to and fro in the opening has been punished. So black is pretty much coasting here. So white tries to draw up some counterplay as best he can with f5. Black just responds with e5. Again, he doesn't want to open up the position because his king's in the center. f6. I mean, what else can white try here? He just needs to kind of gum up the works a bit. Knight takes f6, winning a second pawn. Then after knight f5, simply takes and takes. And here, what's the material situation like? Well, black's up two pawns, and white really doesn't have anything here. So our hero is white is in an unfortunate predicament because black's played some pretty decent moves, and white has not much to show for it. So queen c6, queen e2, just trying to get his rooks active. Queen e4, forking all of white's pieces. Rook f2, knight d5, and rook e1. So now all black has to do is simply take on e3 with the knight, and up two pawns, queen trade should be over. But black saw no difference between taking with the knight and taking with the queen, so he took with the queen. And now, of course, after queen takes, it's pretty much hopeless, but what did white play here? What did white play here? So, black, after having mounted all this pressure, has a winning move. Has a winning move. And this move is queen takes g4. Amazing, right? So now look what's happening. Queen's hanging, but look what else is hanging. Oh boy. Oh boy. And all of a sudden, after being completely lost, just down 2 pawns for negative compensation, he's winning. So black tries to make things complicated with castle, but after rook takes e3, knight takes e3, queen takes h3, this is pretty much hopeless, right? So right now the material is black has a rook and a bishop for the queen, but this queen is just way too powerful. Way too powerful, right? So white went on to win this game. So it turns out that at Patzer's Playground, we actually managed to install a webcam to see the players' reactions as this was taking place. So can we pull up the webcam maybe and see what was going on? Well, let's pull up the webcam and see if we can take a look at what was going on here. Look at the face. Look at the face. Look at the face. Look at his face. Look at his face. Look at that reaction. Patzer's Playground, he cannot believe it. He is utterly stupefied. I cannot believe it. He can't believe it. Look at it. Look at it. What? He's like, what? What? Just baffling. Mystifying. So he plays a couple of moves, and he's just like, well, I gotta go. That's it. I just gotta get out of here. So, what happened? Well, let's tell a story about this game. Of course, white was Viswanathan Anand, current world champion. Black was the man, Garry Kasparov. And we see that even Garry Kasparov not immune to a visit on Patzer's Playground. So you might ask, okay, well, what does this actually have to do with Patzer's Playground? And I will tell you. Because if you notice the opening of this game, remember what the opening of this game was, because we're going to come back to it. Let's actually see 2 real Patzers and see what they did. Look familiar? Look familiar? Should. This is exactly the same position. Anand Kasparov. Geneva Grand Prix. Rapid game. Number 2. 1996. So, unbeknownst to them, these Patzers are actually following a game from Anand Kasparov. So unfortunately, our hero is following Anand. And Anand got outplayed and just got lucky. But let's see when he stops playing like Anand. So Queen D2 and Knight E5. Okay. So remember in this game, Anand ended up playing the move Castle. And after this move Castle, it turned out that the theory was that G4 was very strong. So the main move in this position became B3 to stop Knight C4. Okay, but now let's go to what our Patzers actually did. And our Patzer played the move Bishop E3. Okay, so this move is no good because what move just became 10 times stronger now? Well, yeah, exactly. Now the move Knight C4 becomes stronger. because now we're hitting this, we're hitting this, and we're hitting this. So this is what happened. So queen c1 is pretty much forced. And now what should black play here? So notice that white has a lot of pieces that are only defended once. So white has this guy that's defended once, and this guy that's defended once. So is there a way to attack both of these squares a second time? And there is. Queen b6. So the question you have to ask yourself is queen b6 strong? It looks like it is because it forks these two things. But in reality, white actually has a defense here. So say black moves queen b6. What should white do here? So our pawn is hanging, our knight's hanging. So which should we defend? The answer, of course, is we should defend neither and play knight d5. Because now we're attacking the queen, but we're also attacking the c7 square. Notice that any knight moves would actually just lose. So for example, knight b3 just loses to queen takes e3. Knight f5 loses to knight takes g7. Oh, sorry, knight f5 loses to knight takes e3, and if knight takes g7, king f8. And that wins for black. So queen b6 is the right idea, but not first. So the right move here is actually to increase the pressure with rook c8. And now this move actually serves two purposes. One is it actually stops knight c7, notice. But two, it actually puts pressure on the c3 square indirectly. So now with rook c8, we're threatening queen b6 with the idea of queen b2 and queen e3. And really white has no way to kind of extricate himself, because b3 weakens this diagonal fatally, and any other move doesn't really help him. Okay. But black, after queen c1, played knight takes e3. Okay. And he just wants to get rid of the pesky bishop. It makes a lot of sense, but rook c8 would have been stronger. Because notice the bishop couldn't really do anything. Okay, so queen takes, queen b6. Okay. Okay, so now what should white do? Okay, so again, black is forking two things. This and this. And now knight d5 doesn't work so well, right? Because this knight on a8 gets trapped at the end. But we can defend both of these simultaneously with castle queenside. And now look, we're defending this and we're defending this. So notice, of course, if we castle kingside, we just lose all our pieces to a skewer. But by castling queenside, we actually defend everything. And this is what white should have played. And here white is actually fine, because now b2 is defended, and now knight d5 is indeed coming. And white is perfectly fine here. It's about equal. Maybe black's slight plus because of the two bishops, but white should be able to neutralize that with a knight d5 maneuver. It's not that dangerous, because really all black has is two bishops. And so he can't really break through in the center. He usually needs a knight on c6 or maybe on a5 to, kind of break through. But without a knight, it's hard. And so with just bishops and rooks and queen, it's going to be hard for black to break through. Okay. But unfortunately, white played knight f5. And now black is better.
Check.
Because queen takes e3, knight takes e3. And okay. So now here's the question. Black has two bishops, which is a definite advantage. So do you think black should keep these two bishops and make a move like rook c8? Or do you think black should immediately trade in a bishop to ruin white's pawn structure? What do you guys think? So the answer is really both are okay. You just have to kind of play the position differently no matter which one you do. So if you take on c3 immediately, you have to really make sure that white can't fix his pawn structure or be able to fix, because this knight versus bishop endgame is tricky, because if white can kind of establish a blockade on dark squares, white could potentially be better in this endgame, even though his pawns are isolated. And if you keep the two bishops, again, you'll definitely have a minor piece advantage, but not having taking the opportunity to break up white's pawns means that you might never get the chance if you don't play accurately. So black took the opportunity to do it immediately, check, which is reasonable, but he has to play very accurately to make this advantage last. Okay, so white captures, and now what should black play here? There's actually a move that black almost has to play here. Do you guys know what it is? So the most natural move for black to play would obviously be a move like c8, right? Hit the pawn, get on the open file. Okay, but actually, black needs to do something first. What black needs to do is stop this move, c4. So black has to play this move b5 first. And now makes this move c4 much more difficult to get in. Because after, say, rook c8, which is what played in the game, now white should play c4. And now notice this pawn's on a light square, but the knight guarding it is on a dark square, which means that the bishop will not be able to attack the knight to force it to move. The bishop can attack the pawn, but the problem is white has this half-open b file. So if c4, bishop e6, for example, now rook b1, now you can't really hold on to this pawn. So if you take on c4, I can either take on c4 or take on b7, and in either case, I'll be at least equal, if not better. Because if you take on a2, I think I can play knight f5 here, and now this is looking really good for white, because it's hard to defend this guy. And if you push it, I can fork you. And notice you can't play a move like rook takes c2, because I think I can play king d1, and then I have a threat of rook b8 and rook takes c7. And maybe even castling is fine. But in any case, white's doing very well there. So this move b5 is necessary to stop white playing c4. Okay, but rook c8, and so now, like I said, white should play c4. But he played king d2, which makes sense, but now he's just going to kind of be in a world of hurt defending this pawn. So again, black should play b5 here. And he does. Oops. So he plays b5. Okay, so he played a move late, which didn't hurt him at all because white didn't play c4 when he had the chance to. Knight d5. e6. Okay, so what should white do here? Obviously he has to move his knight, but to what square should he move it? So if you want to play a move like knight b6 or knight f6, notice that you're basically saying, I want to take this bishop. So the question is, do you want to trade this knight for this bishop? Because notice after knight f6, check, king e7, this knight is trapped. So you're forced to take this. I'm not saying it's bad, but just notice that if you suggest either of those moves, even after rook c6, again, you're forced to take this. So, forking those two pieces is not really something that's like, gaining you anything. It's just you're trading the knight for the bishop. But the question is, should you want to trade the knight for the bishop? And if so, which way? So the correct answer is that you actually want to trade these pieces. And which way to do it? Should we do it this way or should we do it this way? Okay, so first of all, notice that there is a difference. There's a difference. What's the difference? Well, if you go this way, rook c6, take, take. Okay, it's white's move here. Where's the rook? On c6, right? Okay, let's go the other way.
Check.
Okay, it's white's move here. Where's the rook? On c8. For white, where would he prefer to have black's rook? On c8 or on c6? So you'd prefer to have this rook, if you're white, you'd prefer to have it on c8. Prefer to have it on c8. Black would prefer to have it on c6. Okay, that's very important because these costing of tempi that amateurs make all the time is huge. It's absolutely huge. Because this could be the difference between losing this endgame and drawing this endgame, to be perfectly honest. Because after the correct knight f6, king e7, take, take. Okay, what should white play here? Yeah, very good. So notice white has these 3 weak pawns, and black has these 2 strong pawns. So liquidation of these weak pawns will help white, and also getting these rooks out will help white. So this correct move here is a very strong a4. And now this game should very probably end in a draw. Very probably end in a draw. So the idea is we want to take here and give this rook a lot of play on the a file. And if he takes, he just creates a weak pawn on the a file that he has to keep babysitting. If he plays a move like rook c4, we just take, and then our rook gets roving very quickly. So this should end in a draw, most probably. And that's the reason we liquidated the knight. That's the reason we liquidate the knight. It's because we have this idea a4, and this rook endgame provides some salvation for us. Because it's almost impossible for black to win this. And with proper play, this should actually be a draw. It's virtually equal here. Because in a pure rook endgame, these pawns being weak doesn't matter as much. Because if worse comes to worse, we can always play like rook a3, rook hb1, and rook bb3. And really, there's nothing black can do to kind of increase the pressure with just 2 rooks. So we can kind of just hunker down on that pawn if we absolutely have to. And our king makes a good defender as well. Okay. So that's what should have happened. But notice what happens with white. He gets a little knight crazy, and this knight starts hopping around all over the place. And he just ends up losing tempo after tempo. Okay, so knight b4. Now this knight, watch it move around. a5, knight d3, king e7, knight b2, I believe is what he played. Yep. So notice this knight is not happy, and he's wasting 4 moves now while helping black run his queenside pawns down the board. So this is something you don't want to do. So I mean, a knight retreat wouldn't have been horrible, but he should have kept it on one square and left it there, rather than moving it around the board for no real purpose. Okay, so rook c6. Okay, a4. So what should black do here? So he should obviously take this guy first and then give himself a pass pawn. So after like rook takes a4, black can play rook a6, and then the rook moves and then play a4, and this pawn is very strong. This pawn's very strong. Okay, but he played rook c8, and after ab5, rook c3, rook hc1, white is actually okay now. It looks like black has a lot of pressure on this file, but notice this pawn is gone. And with that pawn going, go black's chances of winning, really. So white is actually okay here. Okay, so black took on b5, white took on a5, bishop d7. Okay, well, now white's winning. Do you guys know why white's winning? Well, if you remember the little-known rule written into chess just recently, that rooks move sideways, well, you'd know that you can take this guy. And you're probably going to win this guy. And with it, the game. Because notice after rook takes g5, notice that you can't play a move like rook h8 because this guy hangs. So you have to play like rook c5. And now you're just down a pawn for nothing. So remembering that rooks move sideways can often help you in chess. Unfortunately, our hero forgot that rooks move sideways. So he played knight d3. Okay, so he's trying to get his knight back into the game, but free pawns are free pawns. Okay, black noticed it. But now he created the square d5. So now maybe try to get the knight to d5. Okay, so there he goes.
Check.
Okay, check. Okay, so this should be a draw. This should be a draw. Rook a6, and now the draw would just be king e7, rook a7, king f6, rook a6, and a draw would be very reasonable here. Okay. But after rook a6, white decided, I want to play for a win, and played rook a1. But I don't understand why white would be trying to press in this position because, I mean, he's technically worse. So he should have been happy to take a draw. And so now black has a very strong move at his disposal. Do you guys know what black plays here? Yeah. So the problem with black's position is, okay, he has one weakness for sure that he can target, which is this guy. But again, in endgames, I've said a million times that you need two weaknesses to actually prevail. So the principle of two weaknesses dictates that we need to do something on this side of the board. And lo and behold, we can actually create a second weakness. And the way we do that is with g4. Right? So now this is a problem. And if you take, now this is a problem. And again, two weaknesses. Remember, this is like some sort of fork. Okay. So two weaknesses. And now white is worse. So he should have taken his draw, but now he's worse. And the black did play g4, by the way. Black did play g4. So knight c6 unfortunately just hangs a piece because we have two rooks on it. Again, in addition to rooks moving backward or sideways, they also move backwards. So knight c6 wouldn't work.
Check.
But okay, so rook a7, king f6, rook 1 a6. Okay, so now what should black do here? What should black do here? Well, black certainly shouldn't forget. Black certainly shouldn't forget that rooks move sideways. Right? And so pawn takes pawn would just win a pawn. Okay, but I'm going to give you guys a challenge now. You guys ready for a challenge? Patzer's Playground Challenge. Okay, this is never before seen. What is black's worst legal move on the board? Worst legal move. So the absolute worst legal move on the board. No restrictions. Absolute worst legal move on the board. What is black's worst legal move? Worst legal move. Yeah, rook d3 is pretty bad. I agree. Rook e3 is bad. Rook takes c2. All very bad. Unfortunately, you guys are all wrong, because the worst legal move on the board is the move black played, d5. This is the legitimately worst legal move on the board. Absolute. Absolute worst legal move on the board. Do you see why? I see why. Do you see why? Well, we got all sorts of stuff happening. We got this, we got this, we got this, we got this. So all your moves only lost a rook. This move loses a rook and a pawn. A rook and a pawn. So this is the literal worst legal move on the board. Without question. Okay, so unfortunately, I wish I could say white actually took advantage of it. I can't say that, unfortunately. Because white actually didn't play the best move here. I can't explain why not. It would be great if I could just end the game here, but I can't because white didn't actually take it with the knight. Yeah, Arthur hit it. He played a winning move, but not the most winningest move. So yeah, he did play ED5. So it would have been nice to have fully punished black, but we didn't fully punish black. Yeah, so he's still winning, but unfortunately it's not as pretty as taking with the knight. And of course, I'll just show you guys how it finished, because black pinned, but unfortunately this is probably close to the worst legal move again. It's close. It's close. So maybe back-to-back worst legal moves? Maybe. It's close. It's close. Worst back-to-back legal moves on the board. And yeah, and okay, now he took. And here black resigned. So, I mean, it's hard to come back when you play the worst legal move. It's not easy. So I don't blame black for self-destructing. I'd probably implode as well. You know, if it weren't online, I probably would have tried to play king e7 or something. But okay, he can't be blamed. Yeah, so I think rook e3 may have been worse. It's debatable. Rook d8, probably not in the top 24. This was actually longer than 15 minute. This was longer. But yeah, I think black was just so disgusted with himself for playing d5 that he just wanted to get the game over with. Yeah, king e7 is illegal, you're right, but... Okay, so that's the first game we're going to go over. The second one... So this one was kind of like a game fragment, because the whole opening was actually pretty good. Because again, it was Anand Kasparov, Geneva, 1996. So the second game we're going to go over is actually also a game fragment, but for a different reason. It's mostly because the opening is not bad enough to actually merit discussion. So I'll discuss it quickly, but we're not going to actually talk about what happened in the opening, because the ending is really what's the interesting part. So this is going to be the second part of the Patzer's Playground. Okay, so it was a Caro-Kann Bronstein-Larsen variation. And all these moves actually were fine. So this knight goes to b6 to help control d5. Bishop g4 and queen d5 now to double the pawns. Okay, so basically what happened is both sides have doubled pawns. Whites are a bit worse than blacks because this is connected, whereas these aren't. But white has two bishops. So it's kind of a rough equality here. Okay, so we do some moves, Okay, so now black fixed his structure. White's structure is still messed up, but again, white has two bishops. Okay, so we're going to go a little bit further. f6 to defend the pawn, bishop f5 to draw the king back, rook f1 to defend this pawn, rook g8. Okay. So, rook g1, and now rook takes, and now bishop takes pawn. Okay, so we're going to start here. Yes, all games from Patzer's Playground are games submitted by you guys. So I thank each of you guys who have submitted games. I'm sure if you have, that you've seen your game already. If you haven't, you probably will see your game in Season 2 of Patzer's Playground. So don't be discouraged if I haven't used your game yet, because I've probably annotated it already and it's in the gun and ready to be fired. So I appreciate you guys for sending them in. If you want to still send them in, feel free to, because again, I'll be doing Season 2 coming up fairly shortly. So yeah. How do you submit games? Just send me a message, chess.com, Twitch, ICC, paste the PGN, give me a link to the game if it's on chess.com. It's pretty easy. Yeah, you can do it via Twitch. If you played it on chess.com, you can just give me a link to the game. Just send me a Twitch message, or on chess.com, either one. Hopefully you select one that is particularly good, not just like a random game. Because sometimes if I see the game is not really worthy of Patzer's Playground, I'll decline it. But yeah, I am AmazingOid on chess.com if you want to send it to me on chess.com. On Twitch, I'm AmazingOid. ICC, I'm ChessKid. So those are the various methods. Okay, so let's talk about this position. So White's down a pawn because we just took on f2 as black. So we're hero black. So we're going to ask a question as White, which is, how should White capture this pawn? Obviously, he should capture this pawn, right? Because he's on it twice, defending it once. So how should White capture? Should he take with the bishop or should he take with the rook? And yeah, all Patzer's Playgrounds are posted on YouTube, so if you miss it live, you can catch it on the replay. Okay. So there's a reason I asked this question. It's because I figured you guys would get it wrong. So ask yourself this: which piece is stronger, this one or this one? Which rook is better, g7 or h8? Yeah, well, clearly it's this rook on the 7th versus the rook that has no moves except on the back rank. So once you ask yourself which rook is stronger, the answer becomes simple. Bishop takes. Much better. Because why would you exchange arguably your strongest piece for arguably black's weakest piece? It doesn't make any sense. It don't make no sense. So that's what he should have taken with. Okay, but of course he took with the rook. So now, capture. Okay. So we have this endgame. Bishop and knight versus two bishops. 5 pawns on 5 pawns. Black's pawns are a little bit more together, but white has this trump, which is what? What's white's major trump at the moment? Yeah. So white's trump card is this guy, h3, because it has no black pawn on the h file or on the g file, so it's a pass pawn. It's not so close to queening, but it is an outside pass pawn. Okay, so as black, we have the pass pawn under control. So what should our move be here? And again, you can come to a fairly logical conclusion fairly quickly if you just ask yourself, which of my pieces need improvement? And so you ask yourself, okay, let's ask, does this guy need improvement? Well, no, it's stopping this pawn. It's doing a good job. Can't really go anywhere better. How about this knight? Does it need improvement? Well, not really. I mean, it's in the center of the board. It's kind of quasi-dominating this bishop. It's preventing the bishop from going anywhere. It's helping to defend this pawn potentially. Doesn't really have any squares it rather would be, so it seems okay. You can ask even yourself the question about the pawns. Can I improve the position of this pawn? Well, no, I just hang it. Can I improve the position of this pawn? Well, no, I just hang it. Do I want to push any of these queenside pawns? Well, not necessarily. So what's always the piece you want to get out in the endgame? Well, obviously it's the king. So king c7, just getting your king over to stop the pawn would make a lot of sense. Of course, if you just go by the adage that you should get king activity, then king c7 would be obvious. But if you have no idea about anything, if you just ask yourself what piece needs improvement, you can often come at the right answer. So king c7 would be correct, but unfortunately this endgame will be fraught with peril. And he plays bishop e3. Okay, so why is this move bad? Yeah. So the problem is you're trading down to an endgame that you don't like, because a knight versus a bishop, when there's this guy, is no bueno. No bueno for the knight. Because knights are very poor at stopping passed pawns, and bishops are very good at shepherding passed pawns to the queening square. So black is basically forcing white into winning position. Not what you want to do usually. I mean, even if this bishop weren't necessarily covering h4, black should never want to trade bishops without at least having the king like here or something. If the king were at h5, okay, trading bishops is okay, because then the knight can kind of hop around and like win pawns and stuff, but the king is way too far away. Okay, so white's winning. As we all know, though, that's not going to be the end of the story. So let's see what happens. Okay, so h4, good move, because now notice the bishop trade is virtually forced. I mean, there's no point in really playing bishop f2 now, because then h5, h6, h7, and h8 come in. Really nothing you can do. So black pretty much has to just go in whole hog.
Check.
And take. Okay, knight f4. So this is a good move, because we're trying to stop the pawn from coming to h6. But if white had taken first and then played h4, notice that this pawn gets to h6 by force, because now the knight doesn't have this f4 square. So, you know, knight d5, now f5, knight f4, h6, and now it's pretty much over. So it actually did make a difference. So h4 was actually a mistake. He should have drawn the knight to e3 so that he could get his pawn to h6 by force. Notice the bishop covers f5, this pawn covers g4. Okay.
Check.
So this is not as bad for black as it could have been. Okay, he gets his king in, which is good. King in, good. King in, good. Okay. So this knight, notice, does pretty decent work in keeping this king out. So this pawn covers these two squares, this knight covers these two squares, and this pawn covers the knight. And notice that this bishop cannot disrupt that at all. So black's erected a bit of a blockade. This king is not able to go any further. But notice that this king is also now tethered to this pawn. So king f8 would be tough to play unless it's with tempo, because otherwise king takes f6 happens. And even if king f8 happens with tempo, there are some lines where you can like take on f6, take on e5, and then run the king this way and win all these pawns. And you have like 4 pawns for a knight or something, which should be winning. But okay, so king f8. So king f6 doesn't quite work here, unfortunately. Probable result is a draw, though. So like I guess if king f6, king g8, king e5, knight g6, king d6, knight h4, king c7, knight here, something like this, probably ends up in a draw. Probably. But okay. So he played bishop b3, king g7, and now this should be a draw because now the king got to g7. So basically he just has to kind of keep the status quo, although it's tricky still. The point is, if white tries to get too feisty and ends up running his king this way, black can actually win this pawn, and then run these guys. And actually, the fastest pawn at the moment is this guy. It's going to take white quite a while to get a passed pawn on the queen side, and this e-pawn is really fast. So with accurate play, it should probably be a draw here. Okay, bishop c2. And now, what should black play here? Don't forget, tactics exist in endgames too, not just in middle game. So if black was sharp tactically, he would notice he has a fork of a fork. So he plays knight g2, which forks two things. It forks this and it forks a fork. So the good old fork of a fork. So now if white wants to avoid losing a piece, he has to go something like king e6, knight h4, bishop e4 to defend this pawn, knight g2, king d6, knight h4 again. And so, okay, black can draw, but if white tries to win with king c7, then f5 is strong, and then knight takes f3 and e4, e3, e2. So black has a draw that way. And if white tries to win, he could lose. Okay, but he plays knight d5, which is not as strong because it threatens knight e3. But now he's not winning h4. So now the king can penetrate with king e6, which is what white should have done. So after king e6, knight f4, king d6, now basically black's down 2 tempo on the line I showed you because it's going to take black 2 moves to take that pawn. And those 2 tempi are critical because white will be able to create a pass pawn before black. But okay, he plays bishop b3. And now black can just repeat with knight f4. And then do the same thing. So if knight f4, bishop c2, now he goes knight g2 is what he should do. But black, again, plays knight e3 check, and now basically forces the king forward. King e6, knight g2. And now, basically, white should just give up this pawn, but win all of these. So simply king d7, knight h4, and now the move bishop d1. He doesn't want to get rid of this guy, because this guy stops these two. But now simply king c7, king b7, king a7, king b6, king c6, and then a4, a5, a6, a7, a8. And if black creates a passer, white will just sack his bishop for it if he has to, and it should be over. But okay, he plays h5. He shouldn't want to keep this pawn. And actually, this doesn't even keep this pawn because black has a fork. And now white plays this awkward move, king f5. He should play king d6 and again do the same thing, try to go this way and take these pawns. I'm not sure why he didn't. Because now his king is back in the box. Okay, so knight takes pawn. Bishop e6. Okay, I don't know why he would block his own king out from getting to the queen side. Not sure why he would do that. But now black wins. Do you guys see how black wins? King's almost mated, but not quite. Yeah, it has one square to go to. So you guys see how black wins? So it's a nice little maneuver that black has here. So black actually wants to have this knight here to control this square and to control this square. So he can execute this maneuver knight g3, king g4, knight f1. And now knight e3 stops the king from coming here, and he can simply march the kingside pawns. So after, say, king h5 or something. If king h5, you can play like knight d2 and just up a pawn, up a pawn. Okay, but instead he played knight f4. Now notice he's not getting to e3 as easily because it's not with tempo. Bishop c8, so he's trying to attack the queenside pawns. b6, move him. Bishop b7, c5. Okay, so now all the pawns are on dark squares. This knight is still doing a good job of keeping the king out. Bishop e4. Okay. Okay, so what should black play here? Okay, well notice that this knight is doing a great job of keeping the king out. So we don't want to move the knight. Because if we move the knight, then king e6, king d6, king c6 is a problem. So we actually, again, principle of two weaknesses, guys. Principle of two weaknesses. So the idea is that we want to tie this guy down. So we play c4. It looks a bit paradoxical to put our pawn on a light square. But say after bishop b1, knight g2, king e6, knight e3, a4. Notice that we have knight d1. And notice, because our pawn's on a light square, these pawns are on dark squares. And because they're on dark squares, our knight can fork them. So bishop e4 and knight takes b2. And here, black is better. Because this pawn's probably going to fall too. And if not, then this pawn. So playing c4 to tie the pawns down to dark squares is an important point. So yeah, if king f7, notice that black can just, or white can just shuffle around with his bishop. But c4 actually threatens to make progress. So knight e2, now it's just a draw. King e6, knight c1, a3, knight b3, king d6, and knight d2. Okay, so this is a draw. What should white play here? Okay, well, one of the key ideas in bishop versus knight endings is this principle of domination. So notice, what square should the bishop go to dominate the knight? Well, bishop d5. So now the knight can't go to any forward square. And so after king g6, king c6, f5, king b7, b5, king a7, f4. So you want to play e4 and f3. So c4, b takes c4, king b6, e4, bishop takes e4, knight takes e4, and a4. And this is a draw, because this knight has to get back to stop this pawn. And this is actually a draw. So what's going to happen is there's basically going to be a perpetual where the knight's going to check the king forever, and the king will keep chasing it because this pawn is too strong. So white's not going to let black sacrifice this knight for this pawn, but at the same time, black's not going to let white queen the pawn because he's always going to threaten either a fork or a check. So anyway, okay, king d5, and now how does black win? Okay, it takes a little bit of calculation, but the king and pawn ending is actually 1. So after knight takes e4, if pawn takes e4. Now notice this king can never go this way. Can never go this way. So this king is stuck. This king is stuck. So black can just play here, 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 f5, take, and then e4, e3, e2, e1. And white's pawns are way too slow. Because it's going to take white, like what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It takes black 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Last I checked, 5 is less than 9. So knight takes e4 wins. So what does our hero do? He takes. Okay, great. Take. Okay, so easy win. Just play king g6, king g5, king f4. Easy win. Or not. Or not. Okay. Well, better late than never. Better late than never. King g6. Again, notice this still can't happen. Still can't happen. But okay, king g6 again, king g5, king f4, easy win. Or not. Okay. White to move and draw. White to move and draw. I'll give you a hint. King moves lose. King moves lose. So if king c4, king e6, obviously. And if king c6, f5, obviously. Not king c6, too slow. Yeah. King c6 and c4 too slow. King c6, I'm way too fast. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is better than 8 last I checked. So the drawing move is a5. And the reason is a5, take, c4, f5. King takes e5, f takes e4, king takes e4, king e6, draw. I just follow your king. So I play b3, you play a6, play king f4, king f6, king e4, king e6, king f4, king f6, draw. Okay, and there's nothing, whoops. So there's nothing else that really black can, or white can do, or sorry, black can do. So c4, if he tries like, so the point is white's simply threatening to do this. White's simply threatening to do this. And right, if you don't take and play like, I don't know, king d7, now a6, and now all of a sudden I think you're losing. I think. Because now this king is a dominant position. And now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 versus 5, but I get to queen 2. And then I'm up a pawn in that ending. So, you know, for example, okay, so here, 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 take, e4, here, e3, here, 2, here, 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 and you actually can't stop me from queening, I don't think. Maybe it's still a draw, but even this I don't think is actually the right idea. I think here you actually play like, maybe here you just play b4 or something. And then just play like a6, b5. Okay, so c4, king d. Oh, yeah, c4. Yeah, c4, and then stalemate. Stalemate. That's it. That's it. Yeah. And if black goes here, now I think this is good. Then, well, maybe. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So maybe it's just. Yeah, it's this now. Okay, yeah. Now it's this. Okay. Yeah, sorry. Okay, anyway. That's a far field. Okay, but anyway, a5 does draw. Okay, but white played c4. Okay, so now black wins. So black to move and win. Yeah, very good. a5. So the point is, white actually only has 3 legal moves here. He has king c6, he has b3 and b4. So b4 is obviously ridiculous. I just take it. And then now this pawn is unstoppable. If king c6, now f5 does win, because these pawns are too slow. So I guess take e4, king b6, e3, king c5, a2. I mean, just way too slow. And the real point is, after a5, b3, what does black play here? Well, now black tightens the noose and plays king d7. And here, white has only 1 legal move. White has to play b4. And then we take, and then after c5, we just take, and now this is completely hopeless. So c4 was not good. That wasn't the worst possible move. I mean, king c6 would have been equally bad. Or king c4 would have been equally bad. But c4 was close. It was close. But again, there's only like 5 legal moves, so we can excuse him. Okay, so again, a5 is the winning move. a6. Oh boy. And now, actually, black is lost. Black is lost. So how does white win now? Yeah, a5 is always the winning move. So a5, take king c5. Now notice f5 doesn't work, because I can take, and then after e4, king d4, I'm in time. So king d8, king d5, king c7, c5, king d7, b3, king c7, c6, king d8, king d6, etc. And notice f5 never works. f5 I take on e5. So my king is always attacking the e5 pawn. And now black's in Zugzwang. Black's in Zugzwang. So, what did white play? Well, of course he played king c6. So now, guess who wins? Guess who wins? Well, it's surely gonna be black. Surely gonna be black. Yeah, just f5, f4, f3, f2, f1 equals bishop. I mean, you know. Easy black win, right? Nope. Nope. Okay, so I'm gonna make it a little tougher on you now. What's the correct result here? What's the correct result here? Draw. Very good. Very good. And I'll show you why. It's tricky, but I'll show you why. So a5, take, king c5, f5, ef5, check, king f5, king b6, e4, c5, e3, c6, e2, queen, or sorry, c7, queen, queen check. Queen check means it's a draw. So king moves, I can either perpetual check or take on a6. Either case, it's just going to be a draw. So I'll show you like the simplest way probably. So like say king f4, queen takes a6, queen b4 check.
Check.
Say king c6 or something. Queen takes b2, queen takes a5. Okay, draw. Okay, so yeah. So king e6 draws. f5 would have won. King e6 draws. Okay, but at least he's not losing. Okay, king takes b6. That was not the drawing move. Who's winning now? Who's winning now? Yeah, it's black again. Black again. Black again.
Check.
Okay. e4. King f4. This is all good. e3. So notice. What's the difference? What's the difference? c6, e2, c7. What's the difference? Check. 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 It's so brilliant. Okay. So what happened in the game? Well, queening with check is cool. Queening with check is cool. Okay, so notice that if you had gone this way, e3, c6, e2, c6, so now he can just stop it on. So now this is just a win because he doesn't get to the 8th rank. But okay, so let's see what happened in the game. So,
check.
Okay, check. Okay, so pretty simple win. White loses, right? Well, not so fast. So obviously a move like queen e8 just fine, but not so fast. Queen e8. Okay, so now simply queen c6, queen c8, GG. Uh-oh. 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 Okay, so now how does black win? Now how does black win? He can still win, but it's trickier now. Yeah, so queen d6 is forced. Yeah, so queen d6 is forced, and the idea is you take pawns with check, basically. So if king c8, obviously you just bring your king closer. So say king b7, only other move. So you go queen b4 check. And then the king goes to a8 or something. You go queen c4. Then queen b3.
Check.
Then queen c2. Then queen takes b2 check. And eventually you take all the pawns with check. And eventually you sacrifice for this pawn and you run this guy down. And if he takes this pawn, now you do the same thing. Do
Check.
This one, and now if he runs this way, you take this pawn with check, and your king is close enough. So even though this is a bishop pawn, your king is close enough, so you actually have mate here. Because your king is only one square away from giving mate. So eventually you do something like, so like say king a7 take,
check.
Here, 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 here,
check.
Here, here,
check.
Here. So now, I think, oh no, actually I think you leave a pawn. I think you leave a pawn so that you can take this and it won't be a stalemate. I think that's what you do. Okay, but in any case, so queen d6 was played, king b7 was played,
check.
queen d5 was played, and the game ended in a draw. I mean, actually what ended up happening was like king b8, queen b3, check. King a7, and then I think like this happened. Oops, I think this happened. But yeah, the game ended in a draw. So a very roller coastery game, and there was like a rook ending there, and then a bishop and knight ending, and then a king and pawn ending. So 3 different types of endings that both players messed up. No, not a loss. Not a loss. So that's it. Season finale of Patzer's Playground is over. Hope you guys enjoyed that one. Special thanks to our guest cameos from Garry Kasparov, Viswanathan Anand, And thanks, of course, to all the Patzers for all 10 episodes of Patzer's Playground. This one's going up to YouTube. You guys can check out the whole collection, see if there's any you missed.